Hey, I'm Tim Barnes, you are the genre, and this is a special edition re-release of my interview with Ian Abramson. As you probably already know, I've got a scripted audio series that's rolling out right now called Judge Travis, and right now on You Are the Genre, I'm highlighting interviews with some of the cast, writers, and crew of that show. So please subscribe and listen to Judge Travis, and then pair that with some of these conversations like the one that you're about to hear right now with Ian Abramson about writing for Judge Travis. Ian wrote episode 5 of Judge Travis titled Jax versus Raquel. We talk all about how that episode came to be, and then after that specific conversation about Judge Travis, you'll hear our conversation from a few years back in the classic You Are the Genre style, where we talk about all the things that inspired his career and also his amazing stand-up special, The Heist. So here it is. Please enjoy my conversations with Ian Abramson. Mr. Abramson, we've known each other for a long time. We went to high school together. We moved to Chicago together.
We did.
All for a pursuit of a life in comedy. And
That's
we've
right.
done many things together. And so when I somehow got this Judge Travis audio series going, you were one of the people that I knew that I wanted to be on board this mighty writing team. And it was so long ago that I bet you barely remember any of it.
No, I remember all of it very vividly. It was such a good time.
I feel like it must have been 2022.
Now you sound like a science fiction elder.
I think I pitched it in 2021. And so this is like, I keep thinking of it as a little project that could, and I'm just excited that it's coming out now. But so what I remember was you were in New York a little bit before we started this room. You were taping a special and you had shaved bits of your hair off. So by the time we had this Zoom room, you were one, the only white person in this writer's room, and two, had bits of your hair shaved off and didn't mention it at all. I think maybe the last day, maybe Millie Tamarez was like, finally asked, like, what's up with...
I remember this exactly. I was wearing a baseball cap, which was my move to be able to go outside and stuff. I had like when I say I shaved part of my head, it's like I took a razor right down the middle of it, like for shaved head effect kind of thing. And I knew I knew part of the room, right? Like Rebecca O'Neill was in the room. She knew me. She didn't ask because it was just like an eye roll. Like, well, Ian's doing some kind of damn thing. And then Millie and I had never met, but like we're, in the room riffing together, liking each other. And then finally it came up in one way or another. Somebody, maybe Rebecca said like, and I'm not even going to mention your hair or something like that. And Millie, after we addressed it, then Millie was like, "Oh my God!" This whole time I was like, "It's so nice that Tim hired his sick friend."
Yeah. But we have a long history of, especially anyone who went through the Chicago comedy system. You always find ways to kind of pay things forward and bring people in.
Oh yeah.
And I think we were at this unique space where like we both have. There was one point in our lives where we were just like known as this unit. And then we kind of splintered in a very natural way. It wasn't like a split or anything.
Yeah.
And we always find these ways to weave back. And this project started as something that I didn't have any real faith in. It was just one of those meetings where it's like, oh, pitch an idea to this company because they're looking for something like this. And it started off as that. It was something that I stopped thinking about. But then by the time it was presented back to me and I had to write a pilot, it became weirdly personal. And as time has gone by, it's expanded in how personal it somehow is. So for me, the premise of a show about a TV court judge and what happens in his personal life, how that affects his verdict, that's an easy premise. Everyone who hears that premise has 1,000 ideas of how to make that perfect. But then when I started to write the pilot, I realized I invented this producer character who was kind of a proxy for me, and the judge is kind of a proxy for my grandfather, who was still alive at the time. That's how much time has gone on with the show.
Wow.
Is that I'm married. I wasn't married when I wrote the pilot.
Whoa.
My grandfather was still alive when I when I wrote the pilot. And that even then, that was like I wasn't fully processing it, but it was like a sort of pre-morning. I was building up to that, and so some of that is inside of this. And so when the writers room got together and we punched up the pilot, I told everyone to think about the older figures in your life and any friction that you have with them. And I think that's something that all the episodes that I wrote, all the episodes that, each of the writers has their own episode. I think that element kind of shines in there. And your episode is kind of the most experimental. Episode 5, we're calling it Jax versus Raquel. Jax is the producer, played by Langston Kerman. Raquel is the bailiff, played by Brandy Denise. And every other episode focuses on just one court case, but
Right.
yours focuses on multiple court cases. As a comedian, you're a very experimental comedian, so it's not a shock that you have the most experimental episode. And I think yours has the most fun and playfulness with the audio medium as well. So just kind of walk me through the things that you remember about pitching the elements of this episode and what that experience was for you.
Yeah. So I'm trying to remember how we got to, oh, wow, the best way to do this structure is to do like 5 cases. But we kind of like came around. It's like we didn't assign who was writing what yet, but it was my experimental dumbass that was like trying to play with it in that way and be like, we should show this arc in the single episode. We should like we can like do like a time jump kind of thing in a way that's different. We really didn't want to lose track of the characters. That's only in service of the characters. And honestly, that was the challenge for me personally as a writer. Because I was excited to just have fun with it. I was like, man, you get to do audio only. What kind of jokes can you do audio only? And then because it was you and I, we've had, probably like 20 years of making fun of Ira Glass at this point. We love to just kind of like riff impressions of him back and forth. And there's like all these little moments in This American Life that I think are really funny to us. You know, when he's announcing ads, when he's saying goodbye at the end, just like this little the fact that he's always like, and it struck me quite suddenly. That sort of thing. But then I think we got to my favorite thing in this episode is the burps. He's burping throughout the episode, and we cut in and are like, if you would like an unbeeped version of the burps, we have that on our website, which is something that it's so funny that they go to the trouble to bleep out the words, but then there's this other version. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, it became the most fun. And I bet there's versions of the script where we took it to like a 15 and then reeled it back now to a 10.
I think a lot of your episode was that. And I want to talk about what that experience was for you, because I have become a little, not anti-joke, but I really believe in that, like, the best comedies have a great frequency of jokes, but also a great frequency of heart. And I think there's a couple ways that even in post, you weren't even aware of this, but there was a point where one of the producers, and the producers all had great ideas throughout, and it was a very, natural communication to lead to some sort of cohesion. But they were like, what if we, instead of so we're censoring these blurps, what if the censor sounds are just like, an elephant, or, what if the censor sounds are wacky? And I was like, I don't know. I think, so I'm always kind of reining in from, what could be a joke, what they call a hat on top of a hat. And I think it's funnier if it's like a real world sound for the censor beep, for instance. But I also learned a lot from your episode, because I think that the kind of like the humorous expansion revealed a whole nother dimension of the show. Like, it's probably the most that we hear the narrator talk is in your episode.
Yeah.
And your episode also like centralizes what the difference between the core characters are. Like, this friction that rises between Jax and Raquel for the first time in all the 8 episodes really like clarifies like where all the characters stand with each other. And that was really, really exciting for me.
I love that. I'm so with you. As you get older, you grow you kind of need more behind the joke in one way or another.
Yeah.
And I love that dynamic too, but it is much harder. And the more high concept something is, the more distance you're putting between the audience and the thing, because they kind of got to keep track of that. But on the high concept side, you're kind of like setting rules for yourself. So you have to like play by the This American Life rules. Do they do any shift of what the sound is, right? They wouldn't have a reason to do an elephant sound. And that's why it's probably not worth doing it to me, right?
Yeah.
But then also, the moment you put a joke like that into a moment, the only question is, why does it matter in this scene? Right? Like, why? What does that give to the characters? And so then the rule you're following is you're pretending like the burps are expletives, right? And so then you have to be like, well, what does cursing bring into a conversation between two people? Right.
Yeah. And what's insane is that there's so much cursing in these episodes, so to censor the burps.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is so funny to me that it's like just implying these burps are so obscene.
They're vulgar,
that
yeah.
You don't want to hear them, right? And the fact it's like they're not farts, they're burps. That is also an addition to me. I love that, because a burp comes out of your mouth just like words. You have to open your mouth. You know what I mean?
I know that you're the type of person and comedian who doesn't curse very often. So
Yeah.
not only was this your first time diving into something that was like had very open language, I do think that we were very selective, but I was just thinking a lot about the Larry Sanders Show, and what makes certain HBO shows work is that you feel like you're really a fly on the wall, and I tried to use cursing in a way that people would in real life. But you were also the only white writer for a show with a full black cast.
When I was writing it, I pretended like all the characters were white.
And
there's a couple moments where they acknowledge their blackness, and in my mind, that was deeply offensive.
Was there anything unique to that experience for you? Was there something that you learned from it?
You know, when I'm in a situation like that, what I try to keep track of is like, be aware that what I keep at the forefront of my mind is that it's really easy to say something dumb, right? And so like if you say something dumb in any kind of a way, right, very lightly, just like shut up, acknowledge it, and be quiet for a while, right? Like get back, like get into the vibe, because I love to riff, and it's like Rebecca would roll her eyes, but if you don't know me, and the example I give when I'm like helping young comedians or something, I say, dude, my favorite food in the entire world is watermelon. And if you're riffing about watermelon, you are instantly in tricky territory.
Yeah.
And I'm just talking about my favorite food, but you have to be careful. You have to be aware, and you might say something dumb. You know what I mean? You might riff the wrong joke, and you have to be willing to be like, oh, fuck. Avoid that idea of doubling down. But all of that is just like normal white people bullshit.
Yeah.
As far as writing on the show itself, it was being very open to listening to what other people had to say about the characters, letting yourself learn from the characters, right? When Rebecca O'Neill talks about what it's like to be a black woman, I don't have anything to add to that conversation.
You might find something fascinating, though, too. I think that,
of course, it's fascinating, and of course, I'm trying to internalize it, but I'm not trying to piggyback. That's all, right?
Well, something that's great in your episode, and by the way, like when we started taping, there was no friction. They were like, "Did a white guy write this?" That never came up.
But there were lines that like I asked for help with because I sounded white. Because guess what? I'm white. And the characters aren't. And I was not about to do my best. And let me blacken this up. Let me throw in some of this stuff. Like the guess is not going to look good.
Yeah, but at the same time, Sanford and Son shows like that famously had very white, very Jewish, writers, and totally. I think that the key to those, from what I've never actually read one of those scripts. Gary Shandling, by the way, wrote for Sanford and Son,
right?
Who I was meditating on constantly as the show was like not trying to be a copy of the Larry Sanders Show, but really figuring out like how is it that this one despite inspiring The Office in some ways and 30 Rock in some ways, is not those. It's like
Right.
in a sea of its own. It's all because it's you just care about these characters. You care about those characters more than you care about the characters, I think, in The Office and 30 Rock.
Their stuff certainly more hearty. Hank is sad but not pitiful, right?
Yeah,
Like Dwight in The Office is more there's a cartoon element to Dwight.
yeah.
Hank at his silliest, it's still so emotionally driven.
Yeah. They somehow don't veer totally into character. If any of them do, it's probably Hank the most who becomes a caricature. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's some weird like gravitational force on all those characters.
If you watch 30 Rock, Tracy is very. This is like the emotional grounding of 30 Rock to me. Liz is like decent at her job. Alec is like too controlling, or like he's like the corporate overseer that's getting in the way, and Tracy is like the only thing that's holding the show together except that he's insane. But for that character, for that piece of it, if you watch, they kind of go out of their way to give Tracy moments where he's smart. He's like correcting Twofer on things.
Yeah.
And also several times in the first season, Tracy Morgan kind of like looks somebody in the eye and he's like, I'm just mentally ill. That's all. You know, like they try to be like, here's how these are regular people. He loves his wife, right? Like they're subverting all these things to give him these like emotional differences than what you're expecting from this crazy character. I don't know.
Yeah. I forget why I mentioned all that, but oh yeah, just getting back to the Sanford side of it all. I think that you did the right thing where it's like you're not writing in the black vernacular. The
Right.
cast will invent that. And what's interesting about, I mean, a lot of season one of audio were like, I guess maybe animated things are kind of like this, but we didn't know who the cast was going to be. We didn't
Right.
know Bashir was going to be the judge. We
Right.
didn't know Langston was going to be
Right.
Jax. We didn't know George Wallace was going to be Greg, the barber. So, how did it feel when you first heard it all come together years later?
We're close enough that I remember when this was just a little pitch. And so by the time we got to the writer's room, I was fully like, what in the world? How did we manage this one? You like how I say we? Like I'm throwing myself in. I'm closer to like a pet dog in that scenario. But like but I was, because I wasn't part of the picture right into that. So then for it to go there and for it not to just die was really insane. And I do think that was through sheer willpower of you. That's like because once you enter the system, it's really hard. You're like a pinball that's kind of getting shot around.
Yeah.
You don't have as much control until occasionally you get to a flipper and all you can do is hit it.
Yeah.
Here we are. It's still going. The casting was wild. I've known Langston and I did JFL together, I'm pretty sure. And you and I have been obsessed with George Wallace for years. Obsessed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like so all of that just felt like crazy kismet. Brandy Denise, we know from Chicago. You know what I mean? Like it was just cool. And from that point, in my head, it was like over a year from the time we had written it, from the time you were recording. So I was blown away. But then also when we would get like updates on what was going on, I would revisit the material. I would revisit different episodes and be like, oh, right, we did that. Oh, this is the arc of this.
The episodes couldn't just be standalone. There was like that's 8 episodes, and I think we rightfully made sure that it comes to a conclusion at episode 8, because you never know what's going to happen. And I think a lot of shows now, you never know if you're going to get a season 2, so you might as well make it a mini series that has an end. But then, and that still gives you an out to do something different, to bring people back or whatever.
Season 1 of Seinfeld does that. They have Jerry and Elaine sleep together in the last episode of season 1 just to be like, and there you go. If that's it, now it makes sense. Bye.
Yeah. And so you had an audio specific show for Earwolf years ago, and Ben Holbrook, another one of the writers, made a great audio series called Kepler's Ark. So that was another reason that I wanted to bring you two on board, because you had history with telling stories and writing, crazy situations in this
For
space.
sure.
How do you think writing for audio is different from writing for different mediums?
I love it. I'm all about it. And my comedy interests often lean old. Like I pay attention way more to I start paying attention to comedy once it's 5 years old. And then I go back, 100 years or so. Somewhat like that's kind of the whatever is 5 years old to 1900 is what I pay attention to the most. Which means audio only comedy. I've spent a lot of time with, I know a lot of. There is, I'll give two examples of like classic radio because nobody else is going to be able to because nobody gives a shit. Steve Allen, who created the Tonight Show, was doing some radio show, and I forget exactly how it went, but he was like interviewing people in the crowd, and it was something like, "How are you? I'm good to go." It's like, well, that's weird that you're not wearing pants or something. A fact that the audience at home wouldn't know, but everyone in the room would know was a lie.
Hmm.
That was really interesting to me, that you can like, you're kind of like getting to play with this world however you want. You can be next to a volcano without any addition to budget or anything, right? It's really interesting to play with. Steve
Yeah.
Allen is one example. The other example is all about how important character is. And that's how this moment, like I've read written about and stuff.
Your Money or Your Life. Is that what we're going to talk about?
Yes, it is. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I forgot that you would know anything about that, of
When
course.
we
We're
when
the
we
same
moved to
people.
Chicago and I moved to Bridgeport and I got my library card, I got a DVD about the history of history of comedy. So I just remember being sad with no money and watching this, something that would have aired on PBS, and that's the first time
Sure.
that I heard about that moment, and I've never stopped thinking about it.
Yeah, the moment to go over it as quickly as we can. God, the name of the comedian's escaping me. I'm forgetting. It's one of the big ones. Glasses and a violin is the guy. But his whole thing was that he was always a big cheapskate. And then on this is to my knowledge the biggest laugh break ever recorded on radio, and that might mean ever recorded. But basically he gets mugged and they're like, "Money or your life." And there's this huge pause, which already I think got a huge laugh. And then he said, "Come on, money or your life." And he said, "I'm thinking." And it was just so funny to such a simple joke, but what it revealed, right? The emotion behind it, the character behind it, what that adds to it is everything.
Yeah. So, and I think that's a good point of why I think your episode expanded what I thought it like rode the line of what I thought was like the limitation of what I wanted to do with audio, because I really wanted to make everything realistic, naturalistic, implied motion, implied things happening, and not relying too much on sound being the joke. But you found this great natural realistic moment that is also absurd, where Percy in the courtroom, after being warned, takes a little taste of really hot salsa.
Yes. Yeah. God, this episode was so fun to write. We did just cram so much into it.
And it was an absurd moment, and it was sound heavy. It was, and you can't. I wish there should be. I hope there's footage somewhere of getting Brandy and Bashir to make these crazy sounds. I think at one point you write he screams like a wounded dog or something like that. And but it's also character. There's like a big character, rise to that moment. This big friction between Jax and Percy, and then he does that, and yeah.
Screams like a wounded dog is an emotional description as opposed to shoving water in his mouth, milk in his mouth. You know what I mean? Like that's a different thing. So
Yeah.
it is about how do you bring out the emotion in this. The joke is only as effective as it adds to the situation it's in, really.
Yeah.
And this made things harder for everyone. It changed what the characters want in that moment, what they need to address, and it was like an additional hurdle for everyone conversationally. That was important to me story-wise. But another thing I like in comedy is like the unexplainable, the kind of joke you can't quite put your finger on but makes you laugh so hard, right? It's the kind of thing that doesn't fully make sense. It's guttural. It's anything like that. And you have to kind of set up performers for that. You have to give them that moment. So like doing a good performance of your mouth is burning it makes me think of James Brown, where it's like James Brown is doing a million things, but your favorite thing is just like the wow, like it's just like
Where's that coming from? Yeah.
Yeah, right. Sometimes he'll like move his head and you're like, you just can't believe it. And so I've always loved trying to. That's my favorite. And I feel like since high school, you and I that's like one area we've loved to riff in, right? Is being like, I don't know, what if Bill Clinton was falling out of an airplane?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The next part, that whatever is funny about that is what's next, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's usually the part that you do.
but because my mind is wired that way, it's only really effective if you give me the setup that makes any kind of sense at all. Otherwise, I'm just screaming. Yeah.
Great. Well, how to get to the scream? Comedy story, comedy logic from Ian Abramson. Yeah. Well, I think we did. Is there anything else you want to talk about from this project? Any other insights or crazy ideas?
Just how fun it is to listen to, just how genuinely an easy, good time it is. It's not like it's not like a complicated audiobook where you're going to rewind to know what the heck's going on, but it's also not like Love Island, where it's just like you tune in, you'll hear a joke or two. You know how Love Island is full of one-liners. You get what I mean, though, right? Like just kind of like there's a place for kind of nothing entertainment, right? I'm all for it. I watch tons of YouTube, but it's neither of those. It is closer to a Larry Sanders. There's interesting characters. The situations are unique. It's a show exploring the world of a daytime popular judge show. And that is fun to me. I love seeing a world. I love exploring a world, and listening to that very much. This show delivers on that.
Thank you very much, Ian. I'm glad you memorized that monologue I sent you.
I was reading it. The idea of just being one thing never occurred to me, but it was like I want to be a cartoonist, I want to be an Olympian swimmer, and I want to be a trash man.
First I got your voicemail, then I got you. We can meet in person or maybe on Zoom. So tell me what's your genre, tell me what do you do? I'd like to know the things that specifically make you.
Hi, I'm Tim Barnes. You are the genre, and in each episode, I ask one cool person the 3 questions. What was the first genre that inspired you? What was the first craft that you pursued? And how do you feel about that pursuit now? This episode features an interview with one of my closest friends. Some might say my best friend. I might say my best friend. I'll just say his name now. It's Ian Abramson. We met each other in honors English freshman year of high school at Vista del Lago High School in Moreno Valley, California. We moved to Chicago together in February of 2012 in the vague, epic pursuit of a life in comedy. And it's safe to say now that both of us have done some really cool things in that space. Ian has done a late night set on Conan. He has appeared as characters in various TV shows and commercials. And now he has an awesome debut stand-up special called The Heist that's available to purchase everywhere on the internet. When you've known someone as long as Ian and I have known each other, it's kind of weird when you say, hey, can I interview you? But I think it also immediately gets the conversation onto a level that would take about an hour to get to otherwise. And this show is just an hour long, so that's perfect. Ever the rule breaker, Ian bends and contorts with the dynamics of the structure of this show, which is all for your delight, and I think led to a few surprising insights for both of us. So please enjoy this conversation with the one and only Ian Abramson. I'm talking...
Okay. I thought what you just said was racist, but that's okay. Let's go on.
Talking to people who I feel are very much their own genre. This is going to be an interesting one because we know each other so well. But you're aware of what the core questions of the show are. So let's just start at the beginning. What was the first genre that caught your attention in your youth?
The first thing I remember being obsessed over was the Ninja Turtles, which has a lot to do with when I was becoming obsessed with things, right? Like, I was born in 88, so I was kind of like, if anything, just a tad too young for the Ninja Turtles, but that meant it was hitting me the way Paw Patrol hits kids these days, you know? Like, instead of like, hey, maybe cops aren't so bad. It was like, if you go in the sewers, you'll meet true freaks. Which is like true. It's a response to Reaganism. Let's be real. And that's what I was really drawn towards. But what's interesting about the Ninja Turtles is that it was created as a response to the dark superhero trend of things like Frank Miller and Alan Moore and kind of like taking comic books seriously. But that means that those were in response to the kind of Stan Lee, what if Spider-Man was taken seriously, which is in response to the Silver Age of what if we just had a good time, which is in response to the Golden Age of like, oh God, we have superheroes now. Which my point is like, by the time you got where I'm obsessed with this genre, it's literally a Teenage Mutant Ninja version of itself. You know?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I think you were one of the first people that I ever met who was aware of the fact that the Ninja Turtles started off as a underground comic. I think the first time I ever saw them was because of you somehow. Were you drawn in by the comic first or the animated?
I mean, I was a child. It was literally like Paw Patrol for me. Like, I had a Ninja Turtle birthday party, you know? Like, the comics are very fun and cool, and they're truly subversive. They look hand drawn. It's closer. It feels closer to a zine than a comic book as we think of it. Yeah. But of course, that wasn't my intro. My intro was the toys and the cartoon, and those were so colorful and creative.
Like, what is the genre of the Ninja Turtles? It feels similar to the Power Rangers in that there's a group of teenagers hanging out, but there's something a little more underground. And when I think of the Ninja Turtles, even the cartoon that we were seeing as kids, somehow I pair it on equal footing as the movie Hackers. Like this... Wow. I think it's like the movie Hackers for kids, where you... where I assume that the particular joy is like, oh, this is like the ideal group of friends to be hanging out with. We eat pizza, we're underground, we have a sensei, we fight. What are the personal connections to you outside of like, oh, this is just really fun? What do you think you were getting out of it as a kid?
They were funny and they were cool. They said words like cowabunga, which is like, I mean, that's a fun word. You know what I mean? They had weapons, which were cool, you know, and they weren't guns, which made it probably a little more palatable for parents. I remember my parents were iffy on the fact that they did have weapons. The culture was very weird back then. Of like, I was watching rated R movies from the time I can remember, but we could not watch The Simpsons.
Yeah,
Like my dad was very into movies and special effects. So I remember like there would be really, truly gory magazines just everywhere. And he would just say, it's movie magic. It's movie magic. But then my mom was like, we can't watch The Simpsons.
Oh, wow. Yeah, what was your dad's opinion on that Simpsons?
They were both teachers. And so that meant that he would have like shitty teenagers be shitty, and then he would go home and see on the news how The Simpsons is ruining culture and be like, yeah, that's probably true. You know, he really did not like Adam Sandler. He thought that Adam Sandler was doing an impression of someone that had some kind of mental deficiency of some kind, like maybe a disability or something. But he thought that was a big part of the joke. And both my parents taught, I don't know how you would group them. My mom taught special ed and my dad taught kids that were labeled emotionally disturbed. Mm-hmm. So he was sensitive to the portrayal of bad kids.
That is so compelling. I never put this together, this idea of two parents who go to school to work and then come home with all of this very specific school baggage.
It's weird. And it took me till middle school to realize that like I knew about the inner workings of being a teacher more than the other students. You know what I mean? Like I knew all about an IEP, which is an individual education program, I think. Yeah. But it's when like a student needs a particular set of things, right? If a child is in a wheelchair, they might need an IEP to be like, by the way, the day's going to work a little differently for them. And it could also be a million other things. But why did I know that in fifth grade?
I think I do lump you into like the... There's certain friends, like, Jason in high school. And I think also, and you.
Jason and Greg, I remember being, like, intimidatingly funny. Like, I just remember, they felt like a tornado. People were excited when they walked in the door to be like, all right, now the fun's starting. It was wild.
Yeah, but you're people who saw through the veil of the school system in a way.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, we met freshman year of high school, and I do think of that experience as basically, for me, being Neo in that first Matrix movie. Not saying that I am the chosen one or that I got magical powers by the end, but that
for your life, you're the chosen one. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's your hero's journey. Yeah, like that makes sense.
But just that first quarter of the movie, where it's just like, oh, wow, this is what's really going on.
To reinforce that, I remember at first your impression of me could be summed up as like, who the hell is this guy? Some version of that. But like also we got along, but we're also like, who is this? But nobody else wanted to talk about things like Ninja Turtle comic books. So we were kind of just stuck with each other. But then the second half of the year, I was already involved in theater. And so somebody was like, oh, somebody named Tim Barnes signed up to be a tech. And I was like, Tim Barnes? I know what? From my English class? Which is like such a high school reaction. Like, what a coincidence, Oh my God.
And truly that was because of my mother. My mother knew I wanted to make movies and stuff. And so she's the reason I signed up for that.
It was a great fit. And you were instantly a big part of that world. People, that was when I realized for the rest of my life, I was going to see people instantly fall in love with Tim Barnes in a way that just made you kind of uncomfortable. Like Jason and Greg could work a room. You were this accidental magnet of like, everybody wanted to touch your hair. Everybody wanted to talk about your eyes, and you wanted to be left alone. You were just like arms, like, man.
Yeah. But I feel like a connection back to the Ninja Turtles is the fact that I remember us bonding on just talking about comics as commentary on a past time of comics, as commentary on a past time of comics. It was the Ultimate X-Men comic series, which, if I'm not mistaken, came out after the initial X-Men movie and is sort of taking on that realist style. And the Ultimate X-Men comics was like, it was like, this is my thing. And I feel like maybe I got you into that, or we just both bonded over that specifically.
I don't remember how it started, but I remember that before long, between the end of the school day and theater, there was like a couple hours where we were supposed to study. And there was like an assembly line of who had the comics. And like we would be passing them along as we read them. Like everyone, like, all right, who has 5? Yeah. Because like none of us had the kind of like money in our pockets to be getting all of that, but any of us could scrounge $20 and get one of them. Yeah. So we owned like random volumes, all of us.
Yeah, that was like the coolest thing, getting that like when bookstores started selling the volumes of comics and stuff. I feel like a cliche question for Ninja Turtles fans is, who is your Ninja Turtle? Like for the Power Rangers, I'm the Blue Ranger, Billy.
I'm the Purple Turtle, which is the Billy of the Ninja Turtles. I remember as a little kid, one of the big ways that you end up choosing your favorite is who you end up playing as a kid. And Donatello was kind of the last choice. That's the purple one. But to me, I was like, dude, these other guys have like swords and sharp stuff, and this guy has a stick. He's kicking as much butt as they are. But guess what? My mom lets me have a stick. Okay, like good luck getting a sword. You know what? I'm gonna get so good with this stick. You know, like that's how it felt at the time. But then also he was like the invention guy and the smart guy, which meant there were gadgets, and so by the time I was really even thinking about a favorite, I was definitely a Donatello man.
So this is where the podcast gets interesting, because with this information, we're going to somehow try and figure out how it fits into the rest of your life. Ian, this is your life. What was the first craft that you pursued?
Oh, man. I remember, I think it was kindergarten or first grade, my answer to what do you want to be when you grow up? I said, like the idea of just being one thing never occurred to me, but it was like, I want to be a cartoonist. I want to be an Olympian swimmer, and I want to be a trash man. Those are the 3 things. Trash man will probably pay the bills. Cartoonist will be my passion, and then swimming will probably be... I didn't have these words at this age.
Well, it is interesting. That is like a trinity of things to consider in your life, like the practical, reasonable garbage man. Mm-hmm. Fitness is important in your life, and then balancing that with your passion as a cartoonist.
Yeah.
Would you say that of those 3 things, somehow the cartoon element is what you officially pursued as a craft, or how much of it was the garbage and the swimming?
The significance of the garbage was that it was a normal job, and also it was kind of weird. Even back then, like I kind of just like wanted to kind of like have the weird guy vibe. I don't know, you know, I don't really think about it or talk about it in that way, but I remember specifically being like, dude, the garbage man drives this big truck that has like these weird robot arms.
Yeah, and everyone knows they make good money somehow.
That's the first thing anyone says anytime. You know, garbage man, they make good money.
But how many people know a garbage man? That's the other thing. It feels
I don't think I've ever met. Yeah. I don't think I've ever met someone that is specifically that job once.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
And the reason I know that is because I know I would have asked questions that I don't have answers to.
Yeah. I guess, saying as we talk about this, I'm realizing that the proper term is sanitation worker, I assume. It is just weird that
not when I was in kindergarten.
But there is something badass about owning the term garbage man.
Right?
I'm a garbage man.
A garbage man. Wow.
But it also feels connected to the Ninja Turtles in the way, because the Ninja Turtles kind
Absolutely.
of live in filth, gloriously live.
Right. They're constantly upcycling their freegans. Yeah, I love it. So there's that. Swimming, I was on a swim team, and so like that was like the sport that I liked at that point. You could compare swimming to stand up in that there's definitely a competitive vibe, but also at the end of the day you're solely competing with yourself. You know, like if two people go up on a show, and if two people are racing in the water, they're not bumping into each other. They're not affecting each other, right? They're just both going as fast as they possibly can.
Yeah, it feels like stand-up is both a swim. What do you call it? A swim race? A swim? Swim race?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, swim race.
Stand-up is both a swim.
Is that what people mean when they say the race card? Okay. So sorry, what?
Oh yeah. Stand-up feels like it's both a swim race and a pool party. You know, it's balancing those two vibes. So, like, you have to be able to float between. Use your floaty and go between social circles. You know, get to the deep end comfortably, and
for sure,
then be able to race. Yeah,
for sure. I do remember. I had a deep passion though for being a cartoonist. I will say that I did. In my very soul, I wanted to do that. I was drawing constantly. I remember making up characters. You and I related over this. I would be trying to map out a little cartoon world, right? Or these are the characters that I keep drawing over and over again so that I can get better at them. And it's like, come on. My relationship with drawing, that's what I thought creativity was.
Yeah, it makes sense. Even in high school, I feel like it was consistently like ensemble characters. I have this specific memory of a character of a superhero you created who sweats gasoline of some sort and lights it on fire. I thought it was really cool. I still think it's really cool.
I think about that guy sometimes. I can't lie to you. I can't lie to you. I've
never seen anything like it. He's a great character. Gasoline.
Flammable liquid, so he could spit and light it on fire. Yeah. He could pee. If he ran a mile, he could, it was fun. It was like a combination that was like, it was like X-Men and Sin City. That was the vibe. It was like combining those things, and I somehow didn't realize that's what I was doing,
Yeah, you also really loved Mystery Team.
Are you talking about Mystery Team or Mystery Men? I love them both.
Oh, wait, Mystery Men. Yes. And then later, Mystery Team.
Yeah, that's why I knew. Yeah, it was like, we're jumping ahead. The Mystery Team. That's a different foundational piece of my life.
But it feels like the DNA of the Ninja Turtles is still in there. For sure. You love ragtag group of people coming together.
So much. These days, it's heists. I'm all about heists, and it's the same thing. Friends getting together to pull something off. Oh, I love it.
What about those three things? We both ended up getting into comedy, and I feel like we fueled each other with our interests in different comedians in high school and stuff. And then at some point after a couple of years of college, we both ended up pursuing this really heavily. In an abstract way, we just wanted to do comedy, so we did a little bit of improv and stuff, but really had a bit of a laser focus on stand-up there for a bit.
We clearly wanted to do something creative. We didn't know exactly what it was, but everyone that we knew wanted to do something creative, right? So we would get together and watch movies that we didn't care about. Sometimes we watched so many movies that we did care about, but sometimes we would give ourselves homework of let's check this off the list. Yeah. We would watch directors' commentary. We did this for nearly a decade. We would both be reading these, it would be like a show business biography.
Oh, yeah.
And we would fully read it, and then we would spend hours talking with each other about it. I know so much about Louis Armstrong because of you. In that way, I don't know I know the very basics. I would fail a Wikipedia test on Louis Armstrong, but I know about the evolution, the arc of how he was perceived in the Black community so clearly through the lens of Tim Barnes.
Yeah, for some reason when we moved to Chicago, that was one of the first books I I got from the library was this really big biography of Louis Armstrong. How would you describe the confluence of things that led to that for you, though? Like this interest in wanting to be a comedian?
Genuinely, the feeling I remember is fear. That's fear that I was going to wake up at the age I am now and be like, oh, I have a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I can't go off and do that. I can't now, right? Like it would be messed up, right? Which is, I think, what a lot, like, maybe I was like, I better get ready for my midlife crisis now, you know? Both you and I, we were in honors English, but neither of us were good students. And that gave us this sense of like, we can keep up with smart people, but also like, we can't like do the work in the same way. Like there's a mental block. I'm not gonna be the straight A student. That's not in the cards for me. That's not me. If I put all of my energy into that, I might be able to do that, but then I'm not going to be having a social life, which seems to be more of a strength of mine, you know?
Yeah. For me, it was like, I didn't understand, one, the joy of it. That seems to be what people hype up about getting good grades. Like, and then also an element of the practicality of it. I just didn't understand how it added up. And I feel that that's just a fault of mine. I try really hard to be the type of person who understands like, oh yeah, I do this and then I'm happy because I did it all.
In high school, you learn about Plato's The Allegory of the Cave for like 45 minutes. But that was the kind of thing that you would then get obsessed with for a month and fully read. And like the problem was that you kept looking out of the cave. And you then became aware of it. And this is, once you found out the connection between the Allegory of the Cave and the Matrix, it was over. You never did homework again. Like, like you were like, wait, this is like really all bullshit. Like, I'm not saying we're in a simulation. Even if that's a metaphor, homework doesn't matter. Like, it was, and like, it was not in a, it didn't feel rebellious. It felt afraid. It felt like you were shaking people. Like, don't you realize this doesn't mean anything? And like a teacher would be like, you gotta care. And you would be like, please tell me why. I would love to care. Give me a reason. I would like, give me, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think what's interesting about, I mean, how we both attacked comedy was that we both kind of created characters. I think you created a very, like, you on stage is not the real Ian Abramson in a sense.
Sure.
I mean, everyone on stage isn't the real them, but you really created a version of yourself. So I wonder if you can describe who you are on stage.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know if I've ever been just asked that directly like that. People will dance around it, but because you know me, you're just like, but I'm afraid to ask him this. Okay, so you would think it was like meticulously planned in a way more than it was, but I remember we read from so many comedians. We read, like, we would look up interviews from the 60s. You know what I mean? Like, rather than just watching a single documentary on Bill Cosby, we went over to his house and he served us drinks. I don't need to go there. I don't remember what happened. The point is that we really did research, right? Like and something that came up a lot was that the audience kind of tells you who you are and what you do. And if you pay attention to it, it kind of develops. And like any comedian, I was throwing anything against the wall, but slowly I started realizing the most fun for me was playing like with the joke writing. We both very much loved like the mechanics of writing a joke, right? We could play with that all day, and we always have, right? Because like you could, in the back of a classroom, you can spit jokes to each other, you know, like you don't need to pass notes or anything if you're careful. And by the end of high school, we'd gotten good at that. So we had just riffed so much, and it felt like I was really learning what we were doing, figuring out how to do that. And it feels like I'm avoiding the question, and I'm not trying to. My brain
Well,
won't
let's
let me
get to
just
the
answer
point.
directly.
I mean, the big thing people want to know is, why do you Sharpie a mustache onto your face on stage?
I woke up one day and it was there.
Do you feel like it's heightening elements of yourself because you are kind of a professor that everyone's a little concerned about, I would say.
Yeah, homeless professor is a phrase I used to say to myself to like get into the, yeah. And I know homeless is not the correct phrase, but again, we're talking 10 years ago that I only said to myself. So, but like that, thinking of like a guy that wants to be elevated, a guy that wants to have his stuff together, but clearly is not. And it's helpful to make that instantaneous. To deliver that message, it's helpful to have something, right?
Yeah.
And I have since learned that this is a major principle in clowning. In like, if you're studying clown, what is the first thing you think of a clown? The red nose, right? Like they go up and they let you know, hello, I'm not a normal person. I am a clown. And that's why I decided to grow out my mustache.
Well, it stands out to me that you described, the main thing that you remember feeling before you got into comedy as fear, specific fear of adulthood in a way. And it feels like your character on stage is a parody of an adult. This is someone wearing a suit. Someone
yeah, for sure.
Very seriously presenting a set of ideas, and there's a playfulness to it, but I think overwhelmingly there's a seriousness that you have on stage, despite the absurd things that you're saying.
Because I lean silly and absurd, I'm going after people that are talking about something that happened to them on the subway in a very real way. Also, like we've never been drawn towards like vulgar stuff. We don't have a problem with it, but like it feels kind of weird coming out of our mouths, honestly. Like, like I don't avoid fart jokes because I turn my nose up at them. They don't work for me, right? Like that's leaning into the grossness, I need to play against that. I'm using balloon animals. It's very silly, right? And so I need to be very serious about those things. The attitude I try to have is like, you're going to laugh at this?
Yeah.
You're going to laugh. This is my life. My penis is a balloon animal and you're laughing at me?
Yeah.
That kind of vibe.
You are also kind of an inventor as well. I forget what your Ninja Turtle's name was, but Donatello is a bit of an inventor. But have you ever considered the fact that both of your parents were teachers and that professor is a go-to thought that you have?
Dude, friends have sat me down and been like, it sounds like you're trying to teach us something all the time. And I'm like, fair enough. I will try to address that. Teachers, of course, have their own patter. They have their... now I want to go and write a bit about the difference between like an airline pilot and a teacher, how they're talking. But like, yeah, it's definitely part of it. A lot of the stuff we were reading, if you're reading old comedy, you get a lot of like, don't wear shorts on stage, look better than the audience, which isn't stuff that I thought this is definitely true and relevant now, but it is interesting to think about. What are you presenting? You're giving a lot of information as soon as you stand on stage, right? Like what information are you giving? I like thinking about that. I like incorporating that. And then I like doing something that seems absolutely impossible. Absurdism as like a philosophy comes down to contradictions, basically, how like our brains kind of have to pretend like we're wrapping our heads around what is the point of life because it's impossible to really know or have a reason. You can say like, I'm not going to worry about it anymore. Religion is my thing. And that's what I believe, and that sort of thing can work. But then there's just a lot of contradictions, and I like seeming like things are normal, and then all of a sudden, oh, this thing that's impossible or ridiculous clearly has been there the whole time and can't be argued with. I guess what it is that it's not true, but you can't prove it. You can't prove that my penis is not a balloon animal. I'm telling you it is, and I have the microphone. What are you going to do about it? That's the vibe because nobody's fooled, right? It's different than a magic trick, right? In that it's not like, oh my God, how did he make that happen? Everybody knows how I made that happen almost always, right? Like that's not the fun of it. But it's that I did just suddenly make it happen in a surprising way, hopefully.
Don't scroll away. You Are the Genre will be right back after the break. You Are the Genre is an independently produced podcast, so I appreciate everybody who has pressed that like button, pressed that share button, accidentally butt-dialed a nice comment on the Apple Podcast comment section. I appreciate it all. And if you'd like to give some financial support on top of that, there is a newsletter component to the podcast. Just click on it in the show notes or at youarethegenre.com. And there's a paid subscription tier there that is just your way of saying, hey, I appreciate this, and I'd like to get an email from you every now and then. I also use this section to promote things that I've been enjoying. Mainly, it's been Ian's new special, The Heist, available to purchase anywhere, which I think beautifully captures both his inventive writing and performance and a unique ability to open the door into his mind and invite the audience in there. Hopefully there's an exit. Maybe you don't want to know where the exit is. Of course, I've been enjoying Conan O'Brien's recent wave of interviews to promote his upcoming travel series on Max, namely the interview that everyone's been talking about, the one he had on Hot Ones. Conan O'Brien basically defined what comedy is to me. And oddly, when I met Ian in high school, I kept comparing him to Conan O'Brien, which must have been annoying, right? Maybe just because he was Irish, but also because they both have this interesting energy. In the previous episode, you may recall me lamenting WBEZ, the public radio station in Chicago's decision to shutter the Vocalo radio station. Vocalo is the reason that I got my first firm foot into the world of media, and so it will always have a special place in my heart, which was recently warmed by the fact that there is a new hashtag called Save Vocalo that you can interact with and ways for you to reach out and help out if you'd like that station to survive. You can call to leave a voicemail to hashtag Team Vocalo at 888-635-1112 or email info@vocalo.org. Go to vocalo.org/contacts for more. And also, don't forget, there's a newsletter component to this show. If you'd like to support that, get all of the information you need at youarethegenre.com. Now, back to the episode. Where were we? I don't have a specific memory of the type of comedy you were doing in California before we moved to Chicago, but it feels like there was a moment in which Ian Abramson crystallized as a onstage persona in Chicago. Can you describe a bit of the alchemy leading up to you sharpieing a mustache on your face for the first time?
I did that before I moved to Chicago for the first time.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I did. But I do hear what you're saying, but it for me, of course, it felt like steps. Because every time I go on stage, it's an attempt at it, and then I'm trying to learn from it. So when I get something right, it would feel like, okay, I'm figuring this out, right? I remember doing an open mic early in Chicago, trying to do cartwheels. I remember oranges falling out of my pocket in an open mic. I must have been the most obnoxious comedian in the world. And I was bombing. Let's be completely clear, like full on, not a little bit bombing. It was not fun. It was painful. It was hard, but I wanted to learn it so bad. I wanted to figure it out that I just kept trying to be like, let this drive me crazy, because when I try to do like a storytelling kind of joke, it's not getting anything from me and it doesn't feel right. So like at least this is what I want to be doing.
Yeah. Do you have that? Because I try and think of like how I have this idea of how I should be charting my growth as a comedian. And it feels like, it should be that I'm getting more personal but it just doesn't click in the right way. And I don't know if I'm trying to force that narrative on the arc of how I think comedy careers should go. I guess I'm asking, how is your growth with stand-up and your stand-up persona as time has gone by, as the pandemic has swept over us, and as we're kind of re-emerging into this new world? Are there things that you're reassessing?
All the time. I just moved back to Chicago to do stand-up much more. So I'm thinking about this all the time. The way I'm like holding a fork, I'm like, is this something? All the, like everything. And what was the question? How did I evolve?
How did you evolve? Yeah, and a part of it is that it feels like a lot of the momentum when we started, it was this like exciting feeling of getting away with something and kind of like attacking the scene and attacking the moment. And we've been doing stand-up for 10 years now, the idea of like, oh, I can't believe I got away with that isn't exciting for me anymore. And so I'm trying to reassess. Like,
we've already gotten away with so much. We have to find something else. Yeah, I get that. I get that completely. Trying to make anything of any kind, whether it's a song or a table or anything, I think Mike Nichols, I still am constantly watching interviews and reading things like this. Arthur Miller, I think, is into carpentry, and he was saying, like, making a table, it's just like writing a play. And he was saying that kind of at the end of the day, you're trying to do less of anything that doesn't matter. You're trying to remove the parts that aren't essential. You're trying to boil it down and make it the best version of what it is. For comedy, thinking about what is true and what you want to say and peeling back the layers of honesty, that's all part of it. That's all there. But then it doesn't have to be literal. We have a shared love of Richard Pryor, not just as a truth teller, but as a really like silly and creative joke writer. And like everybody talks about how honest he is, but if that man will talk about grief using a dog voice, like, and he clearly has thoughts on grief and all, like there's all of that is in there, but he can just bake it into a really interesting piece. And to me, that's always fun to chase. These days, I'll try doing something like, okay, this is me. I'll try doing a little joke that is real. And honestly, because like it feels so weird when I do it in the middle of a set now, because it's like, is that one supposed to be real?
Yeah. And it feels like you're breaking the character in a way. What is your relationship with the character now?
Yeah, it feels like the car that I drive. And I love my car. That's how it feels. Like I don't think about it. I don't think about it as a character. That's how I know how to do that, right? If you said, give me a joke about being stood up on a first date, then I'm going to put it through that lens, right? Like I'm going to think about that. Whereas someone else might be like, let's just talk about that feeling, that waiting feeling. And someone could like really spin a great joke out of just that.
Yeah.
But if I was doing that, then I'm probably going to be waiting 100 years or I waited 30 seconds and I'm impatient. Like I have fun with that exaggeration, trying to explore that kind of thing. So I'd ask myself, what really is it about a date? Being stood up on a date, it's embarrassing. They know and you don't. There's a period where you don't realize you're being stood up. That might be what's instantly like, okay, that might be the interesting piece of that to me. So then what are other situations that I do that? How can I, I love doing that nugget, that kernel. I really try to keep pulling back the layers and try to have that be a little deeper, have that be a little more honest, have that be a little, because I like doing dog voices, so I better use them. I better try to use them as well as Richard Pryor does.
Yeah. I think that's a healthy way of describing it, that the character is a car, and if anything changes, it might get a different paint job or something, or
right.
It might install a new radio, but it'll always be this car that you drive on stage.
You ever get in somebody else's car and you're like, wait, where is the blinker? And then once you have it, you got it. It's like, I could do that with you. I know how to drive your car a little bit, right? Like I could sit in that seat and be like, how does Tim do this? And that's what it would feel like to do that as you know what I mean?
Yeah. I feel like that's the goal of creating a character that is in some ways replicable, or that other people recognize that. And that was always the most exciting thing about when we started in Chicago, was like, seeing our friends get to that point, or just recognizing that in the more established comedians already. Like, this is how Danny Callis tells a joke. Like, this is the only way that and everyone knows how to do a parody of that person. And that's actually the goal.
Yeah.
But I'm also fascinated. We were talking a lot about how we read a lot of biographies and stuff. One of the great ones is Steve Martin's. I'm fascinated by this surreal moment that happens to certain comedians where they kind of put the character in a box. And on occasion they'll open it up for a show or whatever, but you get this sense that like Oh yes, this is neatly packaged into the past. I'm never going to fully go back into being the wild and crazy guy
For sure.
anymore.
For sure.
And Albert Brooks, the new documentary that came out about him, the joy of watching that for me is him kind of being reminded by his friend over dinner of all these things and being like, oh yeah. I don't know. I feel like that's on my mind lately because I'm deciding whether, certain elements of the things I've done are going in a box or if I am going to keep wearing this suit. But we haven't tackled the final question just yet of what is your relationship to the initial craft that you that you pursued. Now, you mentioned cartooning, being a sanitation worker, and swimming. I'm just interested in knowing what your feelings are about either the version of yourself in the past who had those pursuits or just those concepts as a whole right now.
I would say the last few years were another attempt at like really like, okay, let me see if I can like figure out how to fully piece something like that together. And I realize I need, like, I should focus on my stand-up, build that new material, and letting that kind of be my guiding light as someone creative is helpful for me. And I just kind of know how to do that. I know how to drive that car, right? And the way that I do that ends up getting, I'm making so many little videos and I'm not even like putting out, doing stand up makes me want to try something all the time. Every time I go up, way more than I used to, because what I used to do, I used to try to like build a roller coaster on rails that could go as well as it could because it was risky. But now I have more experience and I know how to, in the first 30 seconds, let an audience relax and know that things are okay and that I can be kind of funny and build up to some weirder stuff, and just kind of ease them into it. Something I'm opening with right now is like, this is going to be a weird set. About 30 minutes ago, I had mushrooms and I'm allergic. What it says to the audience, I literally get to tell them it's going to be weird and then give them an example of how don't worry about the truth here. Are they thinking that? No. Does it work? Enough. You know what I mean? So what is the relation to the early craft cartooning? To me, it's that Arthur Miller, just peel back the layers. And when I do that, it makes me want to play. I'm friends with a lot of cartoonists. The ship has sailed on my art abilities. And when we have a mutual friend, Charlie Rohr, every time I say that, he's like, you could draw, you just have to I'm like, yes, I could learn how big a rib cage is compared to a pelvic bone. I could learn that stuff, but I don't it's not a natural path for me, and that's fine. And instead, the good news is that for people in animation, like the animation world isn't hungry for artists, so like I can, I'm working with Lisa Peters and this animation duo Drawbomb. Drawbomb is like figuring out how to improvise animation on Twitch.
Oh, wow.
And that's instantly fascinating and cool. And they aren't performers, so I literally just say to them, whatever you want from me. If you want a page of jokes, I can get that to you. I write quick. If you want somebody to read lines, like I feel super lucky that I get to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They just drew a poster. We're talking about like figuring out how to animate some little things. I love playing in that space. To me, it really is all the same thing. Craft is craft, right? How you do one thing is how you do everything. And how I draw is how I perform. I throw it up. I do the best that I can. I try not to worry about it. And I try to learn what I can from it. Drawing wise, that means that my drawing looks like a 6-year-old. But when a 6-year-old performs stand up in a suit, it's pretty fun.
Pretty funny. Yeah. You know who else drew like a 6-year-old? Picasso. You brought up this idea of a roller coaster, and I feel like you've had a bit of a roller coaster of life and
career. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Career in the industry.
Yeah.
With some like great highs. Like you were on Conan, you've been in commercials, you've done a lot of cool stuff. And I just think it's really cool and compelling that you've landed back in Chicago to focus on the basics, it seems, but also in context of this post everything seeming life where it feels like a lot of
Feels like we were in The Hobbit and now we're in Lord of the Rings.
yeah. When I think about us starting off as comedians, there were very glaring, clear things to reach and aspire to. And a part of the reshuffling that I feel like a lot of people are doing is because these things are just simply dissolving. I get the sense that you have a very positive nucleus of joy for all the things that you're doing, and you're still excited about comedy and things. But I guess the question is, what have you learned from this? Are you being propelled aspirationally, or is it from a more humble place?
It feels both. It honestly, because I've had at different points in my career, you get a little success, you get a little hubris, and you have to kind of learn and go through all those things, which means now I have a different lens of that. I think my last couple of years in LA were me trying to be like, I really want to figure this out. I really want to do this. I want to work however I can. And in comedy, right? And I have been blessed with that not being nothing, right? Like I've gotten to do some cool things, and comedy has gotten me some great day jobs, you know what I mean? But also we're at a point now where it's like, okay, what do I want to have? What do I want to do? What do I want to build? Throwing myself into the Hollywood system was hard. And the way that I work, I just said, I like to throw things against the wall. I need to fail a lot so that I can figure out how to make something good. And there's not a lot of room for that. Hollywood needs something polished and ready to be shown to people, right? That's like a non-cynical interpretation of that. I realized getting back to stand-up would let me it's the easiest way for me to just shed those layers, pull back, see what I want to do and how I want to write. And I've got 5 minutes of stand-up that's completely silent right now. And I love that. You know, like that's the fun to me. How do you make that? Because it's easy to just not say anything. Is it easy to get laughs for 5 minutes without saying something? I could work on that the rest of my life. You know, like that's something I can always pick up and start juggling. The other thing is that Chicago comedy is so community based, and there are kind of these like clubs, there are tribes or cliques or whatever however you feel about it. All of that stuff is real, but also, if you're getting laughs, a comedian has to respect it. And a comedian, honestly, probably wants to respect it. Even if they don't like you, they're like, they're killing. You know what I mean?
We've all seen that moment. And because we have banked so many hours of just listening to comedy at open mics and stuff. You know when to give a polite laugh because something just sounds funny, just the cadence of it. Yeah. Sometimes the cadence is the funniest thing, and it's genuinely funnier than the joke is the cadence.
Listen to stand up in another language and you'll get it instantly. It's funny. That was not a language.
There's a specific sound to a respect laugh. So it's like, it can sound like a bark or something, but
yeah. that for some people it's something like that in the back of the room where they're just like, they did it. They did it. Like watching them take off in an airplane for the first time. Yeah, for sure. So that's very real. I think when you're starting out, part of why you're doing comedy is because you have a lot of ideas about what good comedy is and what bad comedy is. And after a while, that really starts to shift, right? Because someone like Bill Burr is about as different a genre from what Bill Burr wouldn't do 5 silent minutes of stand-up. And but he would do all these other amazing things, right? You learn to appreciate them. You learn to not... There are comics who have spent 10 years learning to absolutely kill at a club in the middle of nowhere. And I remember the first time being in that situation. I was hosting at a club, and a guy who I had heard so many people make fun of because he was just kind of this like hacky club guy went up and destroyed destroyed. He got applause breaks. And I had just eaten total shit. I had made it hard for him because I had done so bad as a host. And he was in his element.
Yeah.
And since then, I've really done my best to have that be the judge, right? The best part about comedy is that people laugh or they don't. And it gets complicated because people can reinforce some really terrible things through that. But I try to think of it as like, okay, that's why I need to be as good as I can be. I can't be lazy. I can't be, if that's important to me, I need to put that on the stage, right? Like I try to think that because I'm not going to argue with people. If you go to an open mic, you will hear a trans joke, right? You're going to. And I also don't want to be the person that is like trying to speak on those issues, right? And it's like, it's a hard thing to try and grapple with that I'm always trying to figure out. This can't possibly be related to the question you asked.
Well,
there's no way I just said the word trans issues and it had anything to do with this conversation. That was a wake-up call for me.
That was you drawing a vague idea of a new character.
I told you I have to fail. I have to throw things against the wall and then be like, what?
Well, what I think is really cool about you having 5 solid minutes of not saying anything and yet getting laughs is that the idea of doing comedy for the aspirational thing of a special on a certain network, I feel like that's kind of fading a bit because everyone can put a special on YouTube or whatever, and it's bringing more attention to something that I know that you love. I do think that it does feel like a new version of vaudeville is actually the only thing that matters right now. Like something that you could only see. Like I'm sure that a documented version of you doing this thing for 5 minutes would be funny on a TikTok or a reel. I'd chuckle, then I'd flush my toilet, and then I'd tell someone about it. But it's nothing like being in a live space after the confluence of things that led up to you doing that. And I feel like that's like the real source of it all. And I feel like you're interacting with that.
So I recorded a special about a year ago and you were at the taping and I know your laugh. So I can watch that and hear exactly how you feel about everything because I know you and I know your laughs. But what's interesting is when you record a set like that, no matter what, it's like you're saying, it's going to feel different, right? It's not going to be the same. You can absolutely destroy and it feels like you're bombing when you watch the tape and vice versa. I've seen, people have been like, dude, I felt like they were not really laughing. And then you watch the tape. I don't know. The mics are good. Maybe it's sweetened. I don't know. But it's a great clip. Right. And so you have the memory of the taping and you have the tape, and what the special becomes to you is the thing in between. You're kind of combining those things. Like, didn't this joke do okay? Were they confused during them? Well, they're laughing there, like that. It's kind of a weird, half of it is what you perceive and half of it is the empirical truth.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I feel like this is a good...
Can we get back to trans issues, please?
I feel like this is a good place to end. Thanks for doing the show, Ian.
Thank you for having me, Tim.
Big thanks to Ian Abramson for stopping by the show. For more information on The Heist and anything about him, visit ianabramson.com. That website is kind of a maze. Freddie Nunez created and sings the You Are the Genre theme song, and Adam Smith produced it. Next episode, comedian Carrie Coddett joins me on the show, but if you become a paid subscriber to the newsletter, you can listen to it a week ahead of the normies. This is Tim Barnes signing off with your weekly reminder that you are the genre.
First I got your voicemail, then I got you. We can meet in person or maybe on Zoom. So tell me what your genre, tell me what do you do? I'd like to know the things that specifically